Good afternoon, Peter Batchelor from the United Nations. I'm newly arrived in Suva, and I have a question for the AG about Nausuri Airport. I'm staggered that after all these years, the Nausuri Airport is still so small, and we would all, I think, really appreciate if the airport could be upgraded so that we could receive larger planes. Suva is the regional capital of the Pacific, and yet it's so difficult to get people here. What are the plans at the moment, and is the government committed to, as quickly as possible, turning Nausuri Airport into a major airport that we can all use that would benefit Suva, I think, enormously? Thank you very much.
No, most definitely. In fact, there are plans for it. Is that okay? Most definitely there are plans for it. In fact, we have been talking to Fiji Road Authority, and there's been discussions with TLTD, which we need to expedite, and I think get some movement on that in terms of the discussion with TLTD. But it's very much on the cards. Very much. I mean, you may have actually seen on the news a couple of days ago their plans to fix up the existing road coming out of the airport, but there'll also be a 4-laning project coming out of the airport. The side where the terminal is located is probably not the appropriate site for it, which probably should be on the other side. But there's definitely plans. We need to have more direct flights. The population base is here, and of course it is the capital, like you say. There are plans to also 4-lane the roads all the way from Suva all the way to Nausuri. The work will start very, very soon with respect to that. But yes, it's on the cards.
Actually, my question is to the Chief Executive of FIRCA. Most countries that have a stamp duty consider it to be quite an inefficient tax. New Zealand got rid of stamp duty and dealt with gifting with a restriction on the amount that you can gift in each year, and got rid of stamp duty because once they had a more detailed interpretation of what capital gains tax is. In Australia, because of our system with stamp duty being a state tax and CGT and GST being federal taxes, there's a bit of a political back and forth as to why stamp duty hasn't been abolished. But I think all states and the federal government in Australia accept that stamp duty is an inefficient tax and needs to go, but for political reasons. My question is, in Fiji, I think you probably raised circa $14 to $17 million from stamp duty. Is there any tax policy reason for continuing with stamp duty? And do you think you've got any sort of timelines as to when you think you'll abolish it, now that you've cemented a CGT regime?
Thank you for that question. Let me confirm there's no intention of government to abolish stamp duty. Let me just correct that figure. We are anticipating 30 million this year, not 17 million. And that's counter compliance as well. We need to continue to educate, and PR needs to go. Of course, the suggestion that returns must come on board. Very important. But other than that, whether other countries are repealing it, I don't know whether that will dictate the way we will move forward. But we adamant ourselves at home. That's the way government is going to do, is to continue to strengthen that the collection part of it, as well as the compliance. Given the strength in terms of revenue, not only that, but as you know, land sales tax was repealed actually when this came on board together with the CGT. Land sales tax gave way. It's still there, but minor provisions relating to land is still existing. So we say goodbye to some legislation, but stamp duty is still there.
I think if I can make a policy comment on that. Just because it's done in Australia and New Zealand doesn't mean you have to do it here. But I mean, the point is that you don't pay such low corporate taxes in Australia or New Zealand for that matter. And you pay a lot higher personal income taxes also in those countries. So our economic model is somewhat different, in fact quite different when we think about it. And indeed this is what we find when we also are negotiating various trade agreements. If you look at the European model of the economy, is very different to ours. They tax you for how many windows you have in some of the countries in Europe. Their tariff laws may be lower. Ours has also been brought down much lower, but nonetheless, that is an area where we can, or we have the flexibility to be able to increase, decrease government revenue through such direct or indirect measures. So I think stamp duty does provide a revenue stream. It also does, inculcate an idea of stamping duties, etc., we do have a system in certain respects that needs to catch up. So when we have caught up with the system, then perhaps it's something that could be looked at, but it's, like the CEO of FERCA said, it's further down the track. That's not a point of consideration at the moment. But it doesn't mean that we cannot improve efficiencies of the processes in terms of the actual stamping of documents. So that's something that we need to look at, how to improve the efficiencies in the processes that's involved in stamping of documents.
I'm Grant Furness. I have a company called Contemporary Classics International Limited. I started business this month in Fiji, and I love Fiji. That's why I've come here to make my business. But I've had 23 years importing furniture from the hands of Indonesia and from Asia, because I believe I'm giving millions of people a chance to work. They work for very little, but they are skilled artisans. That's why I chose them. In the time that I've been importing, there's been a big change in what happened to the world of rattan and wicker. They developed a fibre called Rehau fibre, Halaro fibre, Vero fibre. It's all what we call a polyethylene extrusion. Outside here, you'll see lounge chairs that are made out of it, and they're very good quality. And that's what my argument is, that quality should be the first thing you look for before you look for the junk. And sadly, the duty that I've been hit with is bringing it in to sell it to Fiji is 32% duty, 15% excise, and then VAT. People coming into my beautiful store, and I would say it's the nicest store in Fiji today, and I'm sorry, I'm very proud of it because I've had 23 years putting together a good look. They just laugh at me and just say, what is happening? How come it's that expensive? And I have to explain that there is so much duty on this stuff. And what is it protecting? It's saving forests because it's totally recyclable. The aluminium is designed to last for hundreds of years. The fibre that goes with it should last as long. However, plastics made in climates that don't exist, where there's no sun, don't rate here. And I believe that's the product should be dutied because it's wasting overseas funds. And it's just building up dump sites. And the evidence in resorts where they've tried to buy the cheaper product is stacked outside the back of those resorts. The homes of Fiji that get flooded, it would be one way of surviving a flood is to have that in your lounge suite because at least it's not taken to the tip. The foam that goes into that product is also very important because if we don't go for a foam that can take moisture, that doesn't grow mould and mildew, we end up with eternal waste. And seeing cushions in resorts that are grubby and dirty, it's because they just can't keep replacing them every 3 months. However, if they paid the price of quick dry foam, which is created by putting it in a chamber underground, exploding it with a gas, that happens in China and America, in New Zealand, Australia, no way can we make it there. And I don't think it can happen here. If someone could do it here, it would be a great industry. If we could get hands here to weave the fibre as skillfully as what's happening in Indonesia, where it's made by artisans that have been there for centuries, not just a few months having a go, then I would say we've got a chance to compete in the world. But all I'd like to say is, can we have a reduction in that duty, make it viable so that the resorts of this place do compete with the world? Because people that look at Fiji as a resort, you go on websites, you see a hotel. If it's a nice hotel, it will have that look. If it's a dilapidated one, it will have wooden furniture that's needing upkeep all day long. And I just think that putting the most beautiful shape in the entry to a foyer or into your room as you walk in makes you feel good.
What's the duty rate, Grant?
It's 32% duty plus 15% excise, and that's on the freight bill as well.
So 47?
Well, you put it 32 and then 15 on 32, it gets even bigger than that. By the time you paid VAT, it's 74 point something% add on to the cost of the goods. And, you know, I've actually reduced my margin that I'd normally sell it in New Zealand. I have a store in New Zealand as well, which is not aimed for everybody, but it's aimed for people who have been successful in life that don't want to waste their money on products that were never going to work. And sadly, people are saving their money hard here to buy something in the name of, well, I'd like to have something that looks good, but if it doesn't work, that's another waste of their money and the whole economy.
Thank you, Grant.
Thank you.
If I can
get CEO FERCA to comment on that.
Thank you for that question. Can I ask you to make a submission for 2014 budget?
I definitely will.
So we don't want to discourage you, but you're right. The duty rate is 32% physical. For the very reason that government wants to protect the local industry. You will accept that some permits are made locally, some are not. But we will need to look at it.
If it could be made here, I'd buy it off you, Logan, but I don't believe it can. Physically, if you saw my product, you say, I understand.
Please send in a letter to Minister of Finance as your submission for the 2014 budget, and we will look at it.
That's if I'm still in business.
Yeah, I mean, it's always to the Minister of Finance and CC to us.
My name is Pratap Singh. I'm the president of the South Pacific Engineers Association. I've got a feedback along the lines of the previous speaker is to do with capacity building. Sitting on higher education as a commissioner, I believe Fiji has got this great Fiji qualifications is trying to work on towards building a better capacity. And there's a very good higher education promulgation. What's missing, I suppose, is the good partnership between the industry and the qualification providers. And our own Fiji National University, I believe, may need some support. I don't know how many of us here, most of us here probably suffer in certain areas of expertise we bring from outside, but it can be done locally. And the support to the universities is important. And I believe the government should consider trying to look at another funding model for the tertiary institutions. And that's purely to do with capacity building. And we have done it for certain, I suppose, service providers. We have international contractors in town. They're doing a quality job. So if we want quality, we want to be self-reliant in the long term. I think we need to look at that capacity building towards the technical area. And of course, coming from engineering background, building and construction, I think we are suffering. And PSC has got some numbers. And I'm just wondering how can the government help to provide more funding to assist FNU, please. Thank you.
There's no doubt there's a need to have more skilled people within the workforce. Of course, have international standards. And there has obviously been, for probably a couple of decades, neglect in the area of building capacities, both at the institutional level and even at the practical level. So we are really starting from not a very good position. And at the same time, of course, there's the need to manage the finances, the limited finances we have. The capacity building in FMU will continue to take place. We simply can't sort of turn on the tap and give them the astronomical amounts of money. We can't. But there's definitely a recognition of that. The fact that over the past couple of years, the Benny Marama government has given FMU over, I think, about $7 million in terms of vocational training. The Prime Minister also announced that there was an additional $2 million offered for scholarships this year, that he's planning to make some major announcements in terms of giving accessibility to all Fijian students who have entry or get offer them from many universities. So that's been worked upon, but most definitely that is on the card. But it's a building block position that we have to take, and we all need to sort of work hand in hand in order to meet those requirements.
Thank you. I've got one I will ask, which has come through the SMS platform, which is a very short, sharp question, and there's the questions we're looking for. AG, with the new constitution, will the Fijian holding shares be opened up to all Fijians?
There's no specific mention of the Fijian holding shares in the constitution, but in respect of the company making its shares available, that's a decision that the company has taken. And obviously that's how it's listed on the South Pacific Stock Exchange. Whether or not it opens it up, I would suggest that it does not. In terms of the development of jurisprudence relating to opening up those areas, that's something to be tested through the courts, but most definitely it does not say it will open it up. There is no automatic right to have access to those shares, no.
But on that, yes, I think the same question has been asked in the Fiji Institute of Accountants one. The Fiji Institute of Accountants do not allow engineers to become members. So same thing with the Fijian Holdings Limited.
Thank you very much.
As that, as long as the members wish. It's the shareholders' wish who become shareholders.
Thank you for
So
it.
we'll keep it as it is.
Yeah, Arvind?
I've got a question for the middle table, I guess. Something that keeps on popping up from the business community, and I raised this at the Budget Talanoa session as well, where import tariffs are applied on CIF values. We realize that it's a mammoth task to do the whole adjustment and apply tariffs on FOB as applied in overseas countries. It's a very uncommon procedure where the duty rates are applied actually on this cost, insurance, and freight value. And in turn, it has an effect on the roller coaster effect on the prices of goods and services.
So we realize it's a big thing, but will it be perhaps looked at sometime in the future?
Question noted. At the moment, it's on CIF, not FOB. But something that can be considered in the future. I realize that in saying that the tariff book is governed with WCO, and the framework is consistent in how the tariff is applied consistently with every members, 173 members worldwide. So I can anticipate that Fiji will be treated, or we should be different from anybody that are members of the World Customs Organization. But the question is under.
None from the floor, one more from the SMS. To AG, Sir, is the government aware of the extreme challenge of the domestic fishing industry faced due to the strategies of Northern Hemisphere donor countries through the entire region? If the answer is yes, is government actively seeking ways to address the critical issue?
Yes, most definitely. Fijian companies obviously have to compete, in particular with Chinese vessels, fishing vessels that get subsidized very, very highly by the government. Grab Southwick has been a great advocate of how we can, together with some of the others, we can perhaps mitigate some of the risks that's emanating because of the subsidies that these boats are getting from the Northern Hemisphere. And we're working on that, and we hope to make some announcements in respect to that.
Thank you.
Here we are dealing with Business Forum. I would like everybody to note that the way to expand business is to look at reducing the cost of doing business.
Okay, if we could keep your question
yes.
short, please, Ashok.
Yeah, so we should immediately look at ways which will help to reduce the cost of doing business. I think it goes to different forums and different areas where these things to be looked at. I don't want to go into detail, but that's what my aim is to.
I think that was a comment.
Can government consider a rail system to ease traffic congestions and perhaps open up rural areas? A railway system to open up rural access.
The FSC is currently looking at the existing railway system that has been used to transport sugarcane and how best to utilize that. We just know that for at least one half of the year it's not being used or completely underutilized. And they're going through the mechanics of that. There's quite a bit of work that's involved in that. We also have some another set of laws that we need to look at and perhaps give more focus to. But there's definitely some thought processes around that, at least on the existing railway network. Of course, the gauge of the railway needs to be all looked at, whether it has the capacity to carry passengers and freight, etc. The gauge that we had obviously was brought in through the CSR days. It's probably the old system. They probably don't make trains that size anymore. So they're being worked on. And there is, of course, there's some benefits, of course, using the existing infrastructure. But that's the extent to which
Okay, that came through the SMS, so whoever sent it hopefully answered that. And while on the infrastructure, there's another question. Would it not be better to build the international airport near Pacific Harbour away from the dense population and convert Nosori to a domestic airport? So that's in contrary to what we were asking, so to speak, but that's a question. Consider Nosori as a domestic airport and take an international airport out to Pacific Harbour.
building airports is not a cheap exercise. concern. The reality is, we can't have a wonderful list of things that we like to do. We are strangled by the inefficiencies of the past 3 or 4 decades, mismanaged economy, corruption. Some of business people have the beneficiaries of what we call a clientelism-based economy, where it was dependent on how well you dined and acquainted yourself with the politicians who were in power then. I'm being frank, and I think people need to understand this. So there has been an enormous strain on government resources. I mean, even at the Navy airport, when, for example, a few years ago, tenders would call on the concessions of the outbound concession area, when one of the bidders felt that that company is going to lose out, they made a phone call to the new wing of the government buildings, and suddenly the tender was called off. So the country as a whole, but that institution, lost approximately $15 million a year just in concession revenue. That's the reality. You had various other institutions where tenders weren't called, open processes weren't put in place. So we are now doing that, as we've said earlier on, that we've called for expressions of interest for AFL, in particular for Nandi and Missouri Airport. And we were in fact very, very surprised at the level of interest by well-known airport operators that had put in expressions of interest. We've shortlisted 4, and we are assessing their applications by the end of this month. And so we are making some movement in that respect. There's going to be a major renovation of Nandi International Airport. Nosori already provides a good infrastructure. There's an existing runway. In terms of bringing in bigger aircraft, you have to extend the runway, and we obviously work with TLTB on that basis, but it overall generates the economic base of it. It's not simply a question of plonking an airport. You have to ensure that you have a better road system from the airport to the main central business district or the capital city. The route from Missouri is much shorter to Suva. There's already a 4-lane most of the way. So these are the things that need to be taken into consideration. And that's what we are working on.
Thank you. Can I just ask, Mr. Gitaki had clarified the matter of the agreement to lease and the lease agreement. Is Rakesh here in-house? Rakesh Ram ANZ? Can you respond the banker's position on that, please, to respond to the banker's position?
Why aren't the banks happy to take the agreement to lease as a security document?
Acting Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, Bula, I hope you are enjoying the forum, which we at ANZ are very proud to support. In respect to lease agreement, agreement to lease, it is the bank's position, or at least ANZ's position, that an agreement to lease is deemed as an intention for a formal lease, subject to certain terms and conditions. So, on that basis, subject to terms and conditions being met, that's when a formal lease is issued. And the perception that banks don't take mortgage over that leases is not entirely correct, because we do, and we are, some of the examples are development lease for hotel developments, etc., which we have funded, which we are financing. So at the end of the day, the taking over of mortgage over lease agreement or agreement to lease is dependent on the terms of conditions of the lease, which we will assess as part of our risk assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rakesh. Is the Westpac in-house? Can Westpac give a response to that as well, please? What will Westpac's position be on that? Any other banks in the house? Okay, so ANZ Bank's view is upheld, and agreements to lease can be taken as security, and that's the position. Mr. Gitaki, if you want to take that on.
Thank you. First, I'm really surprised and concerned that this matter has been raised at this stage. And we have been dealing with all these banks over the years, in fact, over 70 years. The problem has not been brought to our attention, and we beg to disagree with the legal position that has been taken by ANZ Bank. we believe that perhaps this is an issue that the Association of Banks should come and discuss with us. And we feel that a lot of farmers will be affected by this attitude, which we believe is a negative attitude. We wish to say that if we were to enforce, to force or ensure that the farmers actually survey their land before lease is given, and I mean to be registered, then that is an additional burden on the farmers, because it will require the farmer to foot the surveying bill, and also it will take time, another 2 or 3 years, before the farmer actually settles or starts farming on the land. And I believe this is an issue, it's a serious issue, which we should discuss. Thank you.
My question is to CEO Ferka again. The capital gains tax return has to be lodged for every transaction before they are settled, regardless of whether there is capital gains payable or not, but also regardless of whether they are subject to capital gains or exempt. And in particular, my interest in there is for companies that are listed on the stock exchange, where now the requirement is that for every trade that happens on the stock exchange, there has to be a capital gains tax return lodged by the seller, and we are looking at T+3 settlement. So it becomes quite impractical for traders to want to participate in the market, which is already quite inactive and struggling to grow, to have that imposed on them, this additional step. So would Ferka look at, because it is already exempt from capital gains tax, is that step necessary for listed securities?
Jim, can I just ask you, have you been told that those listed companies are being told to submit returns?
Yes, we have just been advised by your office.
Yeah, so that's the way forward. It was started off that non-exempt entities, as well as those that are below the threshold in terms of $20,000, all please lodge your returns. I do understand there's an exemption for listed companies for CGT purposes, but for purpose of lodging returns, it's very important for us to look at these individual transactions. Look at the individuals that are claiming the exemption. We have found that some that who claim the exemption, in fact, were not. They were above the threshold. But I'm just being mindful of companies' intention on the stock market here. We see whether we can make some changes to their effect, but this is across the board. Exemption in terms of 20,000 threshold, exemption of the CGT completely. But we'll take another look at stock market.
If I can comment, we've in fact been discussing that, and yes, there is a need to look at some of these things afresh.
Just a quick question for Dr. Reddy. Why is ready-mix cement not price controlled, but cement is? It's something that came from SMS. They seem to be making more profit, there's claims, where cement actually is controlled and ready-mix is not.
Because ready-mix cement buys cement already, pays the price control price.
He's going for his Nobel Peace Prize. Can I, sorry, one from you, then I got a few more.
This is another question which we got in the morning during the price control, which we couldn't share with Dr. Reddy. Dr. Reddy, if the Commerce Commission is concerned about consumer, why don't you control prices of beer, dalo and kava?
Yeah, but these are something that it's not essential items, and if you get to that extent, then I think there are a number of other items before those interest.
And one more question. This is to acting PM. This question came again in the morning with price control, but the answer was not satisfied. Sir, as a Minister for Civil Aviation, you're concerned why Fiji Airways and Pacific Sands price is control, not control.
There's a lot of competition in the market. but yes, there's no competition in the domestic flights. You have the choice, of course, in international flights. But on the other hand, the domestic flights, we've opened up the market. There's no restriction on new entrants, on the budding entrepreneurs or those who already have lots of cash to start up an airline. Like competition for Pacific Sun. For those of you who may not know, we actually subsidize domestic flights in Fiji. So any flight that goes to, other than Lambasa, Nadi, and Kandavu, all the other flights, and Nadi and Nassori, of course, all the other flights are actually subsidized by government. So I'll give you an example that I saw the other day. You have airlines that bid for it, and so at the moment there's only 2 airlines that bid for it, Pacific Sun and Northern Air. Northern Air is a much smaller operation. So to fly to Rotuma, Pacific Sun for a flight cost to Rotuma is about $22,000, one flight. Now if they sell $14,000 worth of seats, government pays the balance of that amount, every flight. So that's how highly subsidized all these internal flights are. So in order of price control, I mean, there's no way to price control it because we are, in fact, on the other hand, we actually subsidize all these flights. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, there's one question there.
Just talking about land, because it's always a sensitive issue and also politicized in the past. And I'm happy to see the General Manager and PS Land sitting together. It's not often. The government, and I must commend the government and particularly AG for the presentation of the Constitution. Apart from the major changes being done, on Section 30, the right to royalties, I believe, will all go well for investment going forward. 91% of the land is owned by the Tauke landowners. And now the first time ever that any government has put a provisions in the Constitution that they will get a share as well from the royalties of the minerals underground. First time ever, and I don't think any other politician can come and politicize the issue that's now it's been embedded in the Constitution. My question basically maybe to AG and Acting Prime Minister, whether that minerals would also include mineral water. Thank you.
As defined, no, it doesn't include mineral water actually. It includes minerals in terms of gold, copper, etc., but also includes gas and oil. But it does not include water. There is already a levy in terms of extraction, which the government gets, as you know, through FERCA, but it does not include water.
Okay, I've got one here. To AG, can rental and tour companies receive tire rebates just as bus companies receiving fuel rebate?
They can, but they don't at the moment. But you know, we have to keep the rationale behind that is the only reason why bus companies get a tire rebate is because they provide a public service. And you know, obviously, in most countries, when you say you have public transportation, it's generally owned by the government. It's called public service. In Fiji, all public service buses are owned privately. Bit of a paradox, but that's the reason why. And in fact, as the CEO of FERCA has highlighted, they have been for a number of years enjoying a number of concessions, etc. That's been rationalized with their consent. At the moment, for example, bus companies, because they had a VAT component, now that they get to keep that VAT component, we have a particular pricing arrangement that speaks for 3 years. But the reason why they get the rebate on tires is because most Fijians travel by public buses. That's why. So to extend that to the private sector where it's a transportation of choice, then it becomes problematic.
Thank you. I think that's very clear. Another one to the AG. Say, is there any update on the introduction of the Euro 4 or higher fuel standards as announced in the last budget?
In terms of update, we would say we're allowing Euro 4 cars now. The standards have already been set.
Okay.
It's already in place. It was already gazetted. The standards are there.
There's another one here on the sugar industry. To AG, what is the future of our sugar industry? And what mechanisms is the government looking at? The question is not very well structured, so I really don't understand the question myself, other than to say what is the future of our sugar industry. So you may choose to comment or not.
Well, the government of the past few years has invested a lot of money directly into the sugar industry, both with FSC and also with the farmers. The general manager of TLTB sitting here with us is also a board member, and he would attest to that. So apart from the FSC being given a lot of funding and in fact support for funding, there's a number of changes have been made. For example, farmers are now getting paid earlier, sooner rather than later. We participated with the private sector. ANZ has provided a $40 million euro facility. Where farmers previously, a long time ago, used to wait for the sugar money to come in, then they would get paid. Now they get paid as soon as the sugar actually leaves, when we've got the sugar production, because we've got a facility through ANZ. A number of other changes have taken place in terms of the support, in terms of the cane access roads, in terms of the pricing mechanism. You now have fair trade that's been put in place. And of course, we are looking at a number of other aspects, like I talked to you about the railway, etc., the railway system. FSC has now got its own land where it can produce cane up in one level. So there's a whole concerted effort towards it. Unfortunately, sugar, like land, had been politicized. So you either work for one particular viewpoint or the other, as opposed to taking a very commercial approach to sugar. Mauritius used to look up to Fiji. Now we look up to Mauritius because Mauritius took a very commercial approach to it. It's unfortunate, notwithstanding the fact we've been producing sugar in Fiji for nearly over 100 years, we don't even refine sugar. There's been no mindset to, for example, do value adding in sugar. It's zilch, nothing. So now we're playing catch up. So we are committed to the sugar industry, of course. And in fact, it's not the sugar industry, it's the sugar cane industry. Because now there's, of course, byproducts, etc., that we need to look into. There is, however, a threat, as you know, in terms of the politicization of it, but we believe that's been minimized now. The latest one, as you heard, is, of course, the trade unionists from outside the organization threatening to go on strike, etc. But I think that's been managed well. And indeed, we have to acknowledge the fact that the workers at FSC have in fact done tremendously very well, and indeed they have participated in this reform process. And they will also reap the benefits from it going forward.
Thank you for that. That was an SMS question, so I'm sure the person who asked is happy now. PS trade. This is from me, actually. I would like to know if your ministry, being the business, the Ministry of the Business People and the business community, is your ministry keeping a tab on the local investment that is going on in the country? I was asked a question from the media yesterday, how much local investment is going on, and because they see the local investment doesn't, it's quite a bit in terms of, it adds up to quite a bit, 10 million here, 15 million there, another 5 million there, and there was a concern that there was not enough stock being taken of it and not enough appreciation as compared to foreign investment.
Thank you for that question. Short answer is yes. Investment Fiji would have seen the public notice that they are encouraging all domestic investors to also come and register, and also in terms of any difficulties they face with regards to approval, the Ministry and Investment Fiji would endeavor to facilitate. You are right in saying that for a number of years, maybe domestic investors have not been given the same emphasis. We realize that. The investment in Fiji, in terms of inward investment, is at an all-time high, 28% of the GDP. When you look at foreign direct investment, that has been declining. So where is the increase coming from? Increase has been coming from the local investors and the investors that are already established in Fiji. They see what the picture is on the ground, have confidence in the economy, and are investing. So in terms of assisting them, yes, that is a high priority as far as investment Fiji and industry and trade is concerned. We have now established facilities as to how we can register local investors and also assist in India.
So would your ministry be a go-to point? Okay. Because we've got an investment here, right here, which is about $50 million. I'm aware it's a local investment and it's about to come through. Just one comment to TLTB, please, Jim. The relationship between TLTB and government. We understand you're not a government body as such, and you don't get any budgetary allocation from government, but there's a very intrinsic relationship, I think it's right to say, because PM is the chair of the board. And what we would like to elaborate on the relationship so people understand, because you are often, TLTB is often looked at as another government institution, and therefore here as a regulator almost, sitting here looking after land, 91% of the land in this country.
Thank you. As you know, the TLTB is a statutory body. It is born out of a statute, the Native Land Trust Act, now Itoke Land Trust Act. In that sense, we are a creature of statute and we are created by government through parliamentary legislation, which was passed in 1940. I think if I can describe the relationship between government and the board, the composition of the board is now comprised, in fact, is really links the Itoke Land Transport, in fact, with the Minister for Itoke Affairs. So that is not a new thing, because the Minister for Itoke Affairs, or the Minister for Fijian Affairs before, is responsible for the administration of the Itoke Land Trust Act, also with the Itoke Affairs Act and the Itoke Lands Act. Now, those are the two legislations that Mr. Nata was referring to earlier. One administered through the Permanent Secretary for Itoke Affairs, and the other by the Chairman of the Land Commission, Itoke Land Commission. So, in terms of our operation and administration, we are fully funded by the landowners. That was described this morning, 25%, but at the moment we are going at 10% because of the efficiencies that we've been able to create over the years, particularly in the last 4 years, with the land reforms that have been imposed and implemented at that time. But we follow closely the government program because we feel that it's being the biggest landowner in Fiji, that we must facilitate government programs.
Yeah, I mean, that's what essentially I was looking for. Just one thing just came through. The clarification required was that the oil companies are not getting the Euro 4 but the Euro 2 fuel. Does it make any difference? Two?
We are reviewing the fuel standards, and there are plans to implement Euro 4 standards in Fiji. We have conducted stakeholder consultations. This is almost complete, and recommendations will go to the ministers.
Thank you. And if I can finish with this one, AG, will Fiji TV get their long-term license?
I think we have had discussions with the CEO of Fijian Holdings Limited, which is the parent company of Fiji TV, and they're very amicable discussions, and we continue on that basis.
Thank you. There's, unfortunately, we'll have to close the session, although some more questions are coming through. But these questions that are coming through, I promise, we will put it in our communique and it's making its way straight to Ministry of Finance for the budget submission. As I promised you earlier in the morning, everything that will be in our communique is our direct submission to Ministry of Finance for the national budget process. So we have achieved our purpose. We deserve a round of applause. And I really appreciate all your attendance, because without you, the forum just wouldn't go anywhere. It's all your input and all your contributions which have made it really useful, and we've had feedback constantly throughout the day, which is really good.